Hello boys and girls, welcome to my channel. I'm for Classic and welcome to BenchART. So for today what I do have it is Dying Light TheBeast, the new game from TechLand, using their own engine, their proprietary engine, and I'm going to test my RX 6700 XT. And let's start with my suggestion, my recommended settings for playing up this game, which is essentially 1080p median and using TAAU on quality. You can also use other upscaling solutions in here like FSR or XeSS, whatever you like. I just prefer TAAU in this game because FSR was making a lot of mess in it, and I don't really enjoy that much the Intel XeSS, so the only remaining option for me it was TAAU on quality, which, despite its heavily criticized, I do think that it works well on this game. So why do I recommend 1080p median? I do recommend 1080p median because it offers a good balance in between quality and performance. To be very honest with you, I barely notice a difference in between all graphical settings of this game. Whatever you go with low, median and high, all of them look mostly the same. There are obviously differences, most of them aren't really too much noticeable. Okay, shadows, yes, there are improvements in shadows and shadow distance, but it's not really a big deal, for example. So most of the effects, they look mostly the same in between all the settings. It's a little bit like Dying Light 2, where you just adjust the settings whatever fits best to your GPU, because when it comes to visuals it doesn't change too much. The only major difference I've noticed in between the low and median and high, it was on the low settings I could notice some flickering in the ambient occlusion on the grass. But apart from that, what's really noticeable, I honestly, there are obviously differences in there, and if you go taking the digital foundry route and taking screenshots and comparing side by side, you will find differences. But what I'm trying to say in here is that whatever the settings you go with, it will look good, and there are no settings in here. I mean, yes, there is a very low setting that you can choose, but I decided to not use it, and yes, the very low settings, that is a very big downgrade, but whatever, if you go with low, median or high, you will be okay. Okay, that's the thing you should know. So for all the tests, for all the settings that I did try, in between each setting I did erase the shader cache from the drivers, so every time you see these tests of me running this, it is always with a cold start of shader cache. So it needed to generate the cache every time I did enter the game. And so there are some extra stuttering in here because just like many games with the X12 and Vulkan, sometimes the pre-compilation shader path doesn't catch up all the shaders, and so there are some stuttering in here. Not much, not at the level of Unreal Engine 5, let me tell you, so this is very good. But still, there are some stuttering in here when I'm traversing the map. Sometimes when there is a big spike, I was thinking that those were traversal stutterings like this that happened right now, but it's actually not. It's actually shader cache, because I exit the game, I re-enter the game without cleaning the shader cache, and the stuttering that did appear never happened again. Although if I cleaned the shader cache from the drivers, the shader stutter did happen. Now there is one thing that is very weird with this game, and the weirdest thing that I'm seeing in here, it's the system requirements that TechLand published. Now let's take a closer look, shall we? So for the minimums, these guys specify that you need a Ryzen 7 5800X. This doesn't make any sense. They are specifying for the minimum that you need an 8-core CPU, 16 threads from Zen 3. We are sporting in here a Ryzen 5 3600X, which is substantially more weaker and has less 2 cores and less 4 threads. And let me tell you, I'm not having any bottleneck in here. I played for about 1 hour and never encountered an issue on the CPU. I don't know the areas of the game. I don't know if there will be hordes like Days Gone that really requires a lot of CPU. I don't know that. But from what I've played so far, these requirements are entirely false. My Ryzen 5 3600X never bottlenecked okay, my Radeon card in here. It's just delivering 100 frames and above without being bottlenecked. So I am not having any issue with this. Also, they specify that you need to have a 16 gigabytes of RAM as a minimum, which I do agree. And for the GPU, it asks for a 1060. For the requirements, they specify Ryzen 7 7700, which is, well, not too much different from the minimum ones. But let's focus on the GPU. They do recommend the Radeon 6750 XT, which is barely better than our graphic card in here. Okay, so also by default, despite, like I said, my recommended settings for this, it is 1080p median with TAAU on quality. This is exactly also what the game did recommend, and so I do agree with the default settings that the game did find for this system. So it runs great above than 60 frames. Yes, there are some shader cache stuttering sometimes, but I mean, it's barely there. Okay, there are stuttering, but it's barely there, especially comparing to Unreal Engine 5. But I do think that they could improve this on an update, none of the less. So as usual, here's a comparison in between two other settings at 1080p. So FSR quality on the left and without upscaling on the right. So FSR quality on high, it is delivering above than 60, but there are moments where it will drop below than 60 frames per second. I mean, it's very close to dropping. I'm pretty sure the game will drop below than 60, but if you want to play at high, just go ahead with FSR on quality and enjoy those above than 60. It's also a good setting for a VRR, but if you want to play at 1080p high, which is the maximum settings you can go in this game, and you have a VRR screen or a FreeSync screen, you can go with it because the frame rate was never below than 45. So moving on to 1440p, my recommended setting, it is still median settings, but instead of sporting like a TAAU quality or a FSR quality, I do think that using FSR Balanced is the key in here. Okay, so you will be essentially upscaling from something like 800 and something p, I guess, and you can expect an experience above than 60 frames per second. Very close to drop below than that, but none of the less you can expect 60 frames per second in here. And if you have a VRR screen or a FreeSync screen, it is a very useful option in that sense. So I just pushed the video, I mean, to this sequence with the water just to see how it runs, since it's the most demanding moment I did found on this early hour of the game. And yes, it never dropped. It was very close to it, okay, but it never dropped. The 1% volts are at 59. Some responsible thing about it, it's really some of the shader cache stutters that I do have. Like I did get like 2 or 3, which caused the 1% volt to drop. But as you can see, it's at 60 at the moment as a minimum average of 72. I think it's pretty good for this card to play this game at median settings. Even when using FSR Balanced, I think it's a pretty good result. Okay. Now our typical comparison in here, again 1440p high settings with FSR quality on the left and 1440p high settings on the right. So 1440p high settings with FSR on quality, it's a good option if you have a variable refresh rate screen, a FreeSync screen. Okay, it should work for you pretty well. Although if your target it is to play at 30 frames per second, just go with 1440p high settings, okay? You can expect the game to drop below 30 in more demanding moments, but the most drop I did found it was like 28, 29. So it apparently stays above the high 20s, okay, which is good, but it's not really what I want for this game, okay, to play. If I want to target a game as fast-paced and the first-person shooter, I prefer to target 60 frames per second instead of graphics. Now, moving on to 4K. And 4K, this is the first time I'm using the low settings. I could probably try to go with very low, but like I said at the beginning of the video, the very low settings, it's where the game starts to look bad and out of place. It seems like the artistic feeling of the game, it starts to go all the way down. and so that's why I decided to not use it. So 4K low FSR on performance mode, which is essentially upscaling from 1080p to 4K. Well, unfortunately, this doesn't really provide the 60 frames per second experience I did desire. Although, if you have a variable, again, a variable refresh rate screen or a FreeSync monitor screen, probably it can work. Although the minimum frames, I think it can drop below than 45. I don't know if that's enough for most of the screens. I never had a variable refresh rate screen, so I can't really tell if it starts to break when lower than 45. But yes, it seems like it never drops below than 40, and most of the time it is above than 45. I just saw some blips below than 45. That's why I'm concerned about if it's a good option or not. So let's jump to the water in it, and let's check it out how it performed. So as you can see, there was a 44 frame in there. The 1% low is 41 due to those 2 or 3 shader compilation stutters that I did get in here. And yeah, the performance is not really that bad, to be honest. Okay, but yeah, it's not the locked 60. Big stutter in there. That's what happens. Another thing that I was a little bit displeased about my own benchmark is that despite I try to do exactly the same in between each setting, unfortunately the time of day and the weather system was always different, and that might impact a little bit the performance, because some moments of the game might be more demanding. Like, I don't know if the sunset is more demanding than at the midday, so there is this thing which I wasn't really able to pull, which is do an apples to apples comparison. I could also try to use cutscenes and stuff like that, but it didn't work. I did find out where the game stores its save files and try to cut them and use always the same file, the same save files, but unfortunately for some reason the only thing that I did save, it was the config file. Maybe I was a noob, but unfortunately my comparison wasn't really apples to apples as I would actually enjoy to do. But still, I think I did a good job none of the less in here. And we already seen all the low settings FSR Performance performs, so I think it's time to die and check it out how it performs in other different settings for 4K. So the interesting part is that at median with FSR on its performance mode, the performance seems to be mostly the same to low, okay? And it's not really that surprising, given that the graphics aren't really that different. And so I just think that at median I lose like 5 frames per second compared to low, while having slightly better refinements in ambient occlusion and stuff like that. And then I also tried out 4K with the eye settings, which is the maximum you can go at a time, and FSR on balance. And yeah, FSR on balance, since we are upscaling from a higher resolution, something in between 1080p and 1440p, I do see the impact in here. And yeah, if you want to target 30 frames per second, you should use 4K high with FSR on balance. Anything higher than this, for example FSR quality or something like that, will cause frame rates to dip under 30 frames per second more often than not, and so because of that I don't recommend. And so this is the performance for Dying Light TheBeast. I think it performs great, to be honest. It doesn't use too much VRAM, so people with 8 GB of VRAM GPUs will be okay. It's just weird that those system requirements are there. Maybe I'm missing a very demanding section that requires a lot of CPU. Maybe there is a big city in here that requires a lot of CPU. From what I've seen so far, from what I'm seeing the benchmarks on the YouTube, which most of them have been within 1 or 2 hours of gameplay, all of us, benchmarkers, content creators, I mean, we haven't really found out CPU demanding moments at the time. But yeah, time will tell, and maybe a digital foundry coverage will be better suitable if they find very demanding moments. Okay, but for now, I don't think the game needs that CPU, and the truth is, my Ryzen 5 3600 just buttery smooth throughout the game. So I think that's all, guys. Thank you all for watching, and I do hope to see you soon in another video. Goodbye.